This decision is a lot easier than you think, but it is a choice that almost all aquarists have to make. What filtration am I going to put on my tank? And today we're going to talk about canister filters, hang on the back filters, and sponge filters, and everything you need to know to make the right decision for your setup. All right, so let's start with the hang on the back filter. This is the C-Chem C-Che partnership, the title series. Why would you want a hang on the back filter? Well, there's a couple things to think about. Advantages of this, number one, it's less expensive than a canister filter, for example. So cost is definitely an advantage. The other advantage of a hang on the back filter is ease of maintenance. Check this out. I pop this top off. I can take this tray straight out, take this over to the sink, maintenance, wash it, whatever I want to do, and I'm all set, put it back in here. It's just that easy. Moreover, one of the things that you want to look for with a hang on the back filter is an internal pump, or in other words, a pump that's going to actually be in the aquarium. Oftentimes hang on the back filters have an external pump or drive on the back. So that's going to be a little bit noisier. This is going to keep the noise down. But if you have a power outage, what can happen is that pump on the back might not get started on its own, typically won't. It's not going to flow water through the filtration system. It's probably going to burn out. Whereas this one, once it is in the water like this, and the power is out, when the power comes back on, this thing is going to be able to start itself back up. So check this out. Let's get some water rolling through this thing. So all I did was turn it on. You can see the water coming up the backside here, and it's just gonna start pouring out. And I actually can adjust, and this is something else you might wanna look for, is I can adjust the flow. So this is a high flow. I can turn it down to a low flow like that. So depending on what you're keeping in your system, that's a pretty cool option. The other thing though that I might consider as a little bit of a disadvantage of a hang on the back filter is with a canister filter, when you add in the intake on a canister filter, especially if you go down the lily pipe route, you can bring that intake way down here to like an inch above the substrate, which is typically where I like to put it. And that, in my opinion, is going to pick up more of that detritus without having it get kicked up so high to get sucked up into this intake. So look, both are going to work. It just is a little bit of preference, but that's another consideration between a hang on the back and a canister. But ultimately, when you get this, it's going to get the job done. So another disadvantage of a hang on the back filter, in my opinion, is the lack of space for customizable media. So you do have a mechanical filtration coarse sponge down here. You do have these rocks, which are going to help you with your biological filtration. You're going to get a lot of beneficial bacteria growing on those. But once I've got this in here, I don't have that much room, at least on the 35, to do much else. Now this does come in a 55 and even a 110, which obviously will be bigger and there would be more room in those. But in this one, that's one of the things that you might want to consider. If you want to do a lot of customizable media in your filter, you're definitely going to want to go the canister route. So another disadvantage of a hang on the back filter is obviously the visibility. You're seeing the entire thing, but also you've got this much room off the back of your tank. So if putting the tank close to the wall is important to you, that's a consideration to keep in mind if you are looking at hang on the back. Now, one of the myths with hang on the back filters that I hear a lot is that they are for beginners, and that's just simply not true. You definitely can use hang on the backs if you are an advanced aquarist. Many do, and one of the ways in which they do that is they'll actually use this as supplemental filtration. In other words, with a big setup, what this can be is the mechanical filtration in that setup. That's easier for me to maintain, right? My mechanical filtration, my coarse sponges, I just want them up here and I can grab them out, rinse them, I can wash them, put them back in, easy to do versus taking apart the canister filter or taking out the trays. But the biological filtration for that same setup would go into a canister filter below the tank. So you're running both a canister and an HOB, and they're just doing different things. So that's a common setup in larger systems, and definitely something that advanced aquarists would use. All right, now let's take a look at sponge filters. And I think sponge filters actually get a bit of a bad rap, but definitely not from people who are in the know. Just beginners might think that, I don't know, it's not as useful, it's not as cool as this, it's not gonna work. But the truth is, sponge filters can be amazingly useful in an aquarium. Let's talk about how they work. So a sponge filter is gonna come with a weighted bottom. It's gonna hold it down to the base of the aquarium, right? And if I pop this top off, you'll see that it's just a sponge surrounded by a chamber like this. Now, what's gonna happen is we're gonna plug an air line tube into this hole right here, and it's going to shoot air down here into the bottom. And when that air lifts up, it creates a suction, and that's what creates the flow through the sponge and ultimately cleans the aquarium. Now, a sponge is hugely useful for collecting beneficial bacteria. If you put this in the corner of your tank, beneficial bacteria will grow all over it. And not only is that helpful just to have more in your aquarium, but a lot of people who have more than one aquarium, they'll run a sponge filter in the corner of one, it gets seeded with all that beneficial bacteria, and then when they start up a new one, they can just take that sponge and drop it in the new aquarium, and it literally is instantly cycled. Now, the other thing that sponge filters come with is this right here, and this will just pop onto the top. And all this does is create a little bit more uplift. And so this is just an add-on. You don't have to use it, but it is a way in which you can actually essentially increase the flow. So that's what that's for. Now, what you need to do is put an airline tube onto just this part right here, and then you'll connect the airline tube to a little pump like this that would be below your aquarium. And that's all it is. That's all it takes to run a sponge filter. So let's try it out and see how it works. All right, so once you have your filter set up, you can see that it's just gonna sink down like that. Put it in the corner here, set it up with our pump, plug it in. This Eheim Air 100 pump actually has adjustable flow, so I can turn it down and keep it like that, or I can turn it up and you can see the difference. Now, that extra flow is also going to increase the flow of the suction that you have with your sponge filter. So that's one consideration, depending on what you're doing or how big your tank is. But you can see that not only are you getting the filtration through the sponge, but you're also creating extra oxygenation up here at the surface of the water, and you're breaking up dead spots that can sometimes exist in tanks, especially long tanks. So, all these are the advantages of a sponge filter. Now, the disadvantages of a sponge filter are obviously the visibility, right? You're going to see this thing pretty clearly in your tank. Now, that said, you can definitely hide it with some plants, and also keep in mind that these come in a variety of sizes. So you can get sponge filters that are literally really pretty small, or you can get ones that are pretty big. And I can tell you that really seasoned aquarists actually only run sponge filters on some of their tanks, and it gets the job done. So these things are hugely effective and not to be overlooked. That is one of the biggest myths with sponge filters, is that they're for beginners, that they aren't going to, actually filter the water, and all of that is not true. And one of the biggest advantages is you have a way to seed other tanks with beneficial bacteria. All right, now we got the canister filter. Now this is the thing that a lot of people, strive for. I want to have a canister filter someday. I think a canister filter is the coolest thing, all that kind of stuff. And the truth is, yeah, they're pretty cool, but you don't have to have a canister filter to be successful. That is for sure. But let me tell you what the advantages are of having one. Now, number one, it's out of sight, out of mind. These other options are visible. This one's not. It's going to be below your tank, and that's actually a pretty sweet advantage. Now, on top of that, it's also going to be quiet. You're not going to hear this thing like you're going to hear the bubbler, or you might hear an external motor on an HOB. So that's another advantage. Now, the biggest advantage, I think, of a canister filter is the customizability. So when you pull this thing out, you've got multiple trays, right? Depending on your canister filter, they're all going to have just a couple at least, if not more than that. But you take these apart, and now I can put different things in these trays depending on my setup. I've got a lot of room for additional biological filtration. I got a lot of room for additional mechanical or chemical filtration. So I think that is the main reason why I like canister filters, because I like to have the flexibility to change up what's in my trays. I also love the fact that I can connect these to glass pipes, like lily pipes, like these guys back here. And I really love that look of lily pipes. I think it adds a lot to the aquarium, and that's another thing that you can do with canister filters. So there's definitely some advantages to canister filters, but there are some disadvantages as well. The number one is probably cost. It is going to be the most expensive of the three. There's also space. It's going to take up a lot of room under your stand, so just make sure that you can accommodate that. And then maintenance is going to be a little bit more of an event than it will be when you just come over here and just pull this tray out nice and easily. With this one, you're gonna have to flip the top off, and you're gonna have to take the trays out and disconnect them. You're gonna have to disconnect this from the water source. None of that is a huge deal, but it is going to be a little bit more time consuming to clean a canister filter than some of these other ones. But those are the considerations. Now, I think the biggest myth when it comes to canister filters is that they're advanced. It's like the opposite myth of HOBs, where people think they're only for beginners. These are definitely not for advanced aquarists only. You can run a canister filter when you're just getting started. They are super easy to set up, and they are very easy to operate. So don't let that deter you. If a canister filter is the way you want to go, just do it. Other than that, pick the best filter that's right for you and have a great time aquascaping.